I used to dream that I was him. So I wasn't just dreaming about Robin. I would dream that I was him. And that's a very odd feeling. Like, oh, I'm Robin Williams in this dream. How fun for me. And whatever was happening as Robin Williams. So this relationship with Robin goes way back, even before he died. I've always felt this weird connection with him ever since I saw him on Mork and Mindy. So how much of the film is true? The veracity of this film is largely true. The emotional basis of this film starts with Robin died. First of all, I got out of show business and I still live in New England. I still paint pictures. That's what I do. And I still do shows. I got back to my career. Robin dies. It took me a few days for it to sink in, and then I was tragically and just horribly upset. And like everybody else, like, how could that even be? How is that even possible? That fireball of energy, of brilliance, is gone.
This is Coops Comedy Corner. Buckle up because it's funny as Coops Comedy Corner.
Welcome to Coop's Comedy Corner. I'm Steve Coop. I'm your host. We have a great show tonight. I'm bringing some great comedians and TV writers, and he has a pet with him. And I met this gentleman. He recorded Cooper Talk when I lived in LA, and he came to the studio in Burbank. And now we're both back east. He's in Massachusetts. I'm in New Jersey, and my guest is Roger Kabler. How you doing, Roger?
I don't know why I do that on podcast. This is Graul. He's Spanish. Hi, Steve. Good to see you.
So I want to talk about your career, but I want to talk. I watched. You sent me the link to Being Robin, and I watched it, and we're going to get to that. And it's funny because people just Roger has had a fascinating career, and he was also I have a copy of the book. You had the book about the dog. You gave me that. Tell me about that book. You wrote that book. You gave that to me like 8 or 9 years ago. Tell me about the book.
That was a long time ago. That book was something that I illustrated and that my former wife, Mary, wrote. And I want to add that when we say ex, it's not as respectful as saying their name too, because she's a person. So I'm just saying my former wife, Mary. She wrote it. I illustrated it, and it was a lot of fun. I'd never done that before. As a matter of fact, this is one of the illustrations. It's just hanging on my wall. If you can see that, it's a little show and tell.
Yeah, now,
the dog up there giving the speech. There he is.
Let me ask you about that. In Being Robin, you talk about how you knocked it over. How you talked about how you started painting. Did you always paint? Like, when did you get this? Like, as a kid, did you paint? Did you go to art class? Because I remember when I was little, I won a prize. I did a charcoal painting of a bear. And my mom took me to like the Cherry Hill community in the summer, and I won that. But when did you start painting?
What was the charcoal painting of?
The bear. It was like a stuffed bear. Yeah.
Cool. You still got it?
No, I don't know what happened to it. So
I still got a whole big portfolio of all my high school, which is like a high school, but it's like about this. My portfolio of all my high school work, which is where I got the training. Really wasn't much training. I'd walk into the art class stoned. I'd sketch, and then the teacher would yell at me for leaving the materials around. But sometimes I'd skip school and stayed home and drew, and I would do drawings. I was much more interested in drawing than learning math, or words. So that's really was just my passion. And, that I had planned on going to art school, and I didn't. I was a fisherman instead after high school. So I never went to college.
But you were a fisherman? I mean, wait, tell me about this, because I want to hear the journey from being a fisherman to a stand-up comic. I mean, I've never heard that story. I've never heard of being a fisherman in the comic.
So I was a fisherman when I was 15. My parents let me go live in Falmouth and go out in a party fishing boat. But I got into some trouble with a girl and a case of beer and some cops. And then when I was 18, I moved to Marblehead and signed on a boat owned by Bob Brown, who was the owner of the Andrea Gale from The Perfect Storm. You know the movie Perfect Storm? So I worked for that guy, and I went out in one of those situations, and the seas were like 35-foot swells, and it smacked down into a storm, and I thought the boat was going to explode. And we got back, and I just, on the way in, I said, if I ever see land again, I'm going to be an actor. And that was the only trip I went out on. It was intense, and I was 18. I was terrified. And then I read The Perfect Storm years later, and found out what happened to one of the guys. He got swept overboard on another boat. And then the Perfect Storm, the Andrea Gale. So I have some history there. New England fishing. Formative.
So you decided you wanted to decide you want to go to acting. Where do you start then? I mean, you're 18 years old. You said you didn't go to college. Where do you start? When do you decide to start acting? And I want to go into the stand-up because you still are a phenomenal impressionist. And I remember, because I want to do it later, I want to see who does a better Eric Roberts, me or you, because I actually did my Eric Roberts.
If anybody knows who he is.
I had Eric Roberts on my other podcast, and I did it for him, and he liked it.
Oh,
but
did he like it?
But so tell me, yeah, he liked it. He goes, he
that's great.
That's pretty good. So tell me your passage from 18 to getting into comedy. I mean, getting to acting, then stand up.
Well, like I said, when I came to shore from that fateful trip, I decided to be an entertainer. Now, I was a child actor when I was from 11 years old. I did local community theater and dinner theater at the Chateau de Ville, which was a New England thing. It was kind of a big deal. And so I got a taste for it then. And I would do plays up to the time I was in high school. And my phone's about to ring. No, it's not. And I at some point I stopped because I wasn't feeling very manly. And so I went out in a fishing boat, and I decided to pick it up again if I ever saw land again. So I then went back to community theater and did some serious work. I did Butterflies Are Free, which is like The Blind Guy. Hoo-ah! Ah! I didn't play it like that, though. Little Donnie Dark. And all that vision. And then I did Equus, which was a very serious play about a emotionally disturbed teenager who blinds 6 horses with a metal spike. Tough gig, but that was where I felt really involved as an actor. And then I moved to New York when I was 20. I studied with Sanford Meisner at the Neighborhood Playhouse and Herbert Berghoff at the other one. I can't think of the name of the theater. And then did some plays. And, by the time I was in my mid-20s, I was very disillusioned with the theater because I did a play with the late Robert Patrick, who was a brilliant and quite famous playwright who did Kennedy's Children. Who cares, man? Kennedy's Children. But I wanted to work with Robert Patrick. And he said, we're doing this play, and I want you. And I did Shakespeare, and I got a part. And then he calls me up. He says, we're actually going to do this other thing called Blue is for Boys. And I'm like, cool, what's that? Well, you're going to play a tough leather gay person. And I'm like, fine. So I played the tough leather gay person, thinking we're going to do this other thing. We never did it. And I was feeling like really, that's pulling the rug out from under me was not the way to keep me in the theater. So I went off into a life of comedy, and I started working cabarets in New York. I built an act about a crazy impressionist who loses sight of what he's doing. And the first time I performed it, William Morris was in the audience, the agency. And from there, they put me opening for the Spinners, which was a total disaster. I don't know if you want to hear that story, in Atlantic City.
Yeah, I want to hear why it was a disaster. I love disaster comedy stories.
Yeah, this is disaster. My whole career is full of disasters. Don't look for the brass ring. It's there, but it's got grease all over it. So the first real big disaster was when I was 18. My very first time on stage, somebody had an epileptic fit in the middle of my act. And I thought it was just a heckler, so I kept going. And I have it on cassette tape. It's disturbing. The next disaster was opening for the Spinners in Atlantic City with only like 3 or 4 months of stand-up experience under my belt. And William Morris likes to, grab their new comedians and throw them against the wall and see if they stick. And I just slid down because I was doing all of these impressions that were like John Travolta and Al Pacino and Marlon Brando and all these Italian guys. And I've got an audience of approximately 500 elderly Black people waiting for the spinners. So I'm doing 15 minutes. Now, I knew I had made the big talk before I got there, because when I got there was my name on the door and a gold plate, my dressing room. And I'm like, this is me. I have arrived. And I open the door, and there is this spread of fruits and cheeses and deli meats and wine and beer. It was for me. And the bombing was so horrific. The next night when I walked into my dressing room, there was a bottle of warm soda and a cup. That's my disaster.
So
That's how you know.
Were you doing the impressions and they just didn't like you, or what happened?
Well, they were like, I don't, the problem was I didn't know the etiquette. Like after I bombed, I'm sort of davening and I'm Jewish and I'm gonna, thank you. And I'm picking up my costume from the floor and thank you. I have my things. I'm a bum. I'm not a jerk. And I'm just like being like totally, and they're like, well, I don't, you try. And there's like 3 people clapping out of 500. And I'm not kidding. It was a smattering. And if you're going to bomb big. Bomb in Atlantic City in front of 500 people that do not know any of your references. Why they put me there, I don't know. And the other time is when I opened for Cher, not that long after that, in Ottawa, which was another big deal, But it was for half a football stadium. It was like 8,000 people. And they get me out there and I'm doing my impressions, but I want to start. I'm like, look at the size of this place. It's like a sporting event. Let's do the national anthem. I'm doing my thing. Where's your patriotism? Everybody up, come on. And it was like 2 weeks later, I realized I was in Canada. Oh, wow. Yeah, all right. El Duccio Baggio strikes again. I mean, I'm not proud, man. I'm really not proud.
Those stories that make you who you are. But how did you rebound after them? Because that's the thing. Like when I first went on stage, I had a good set. And, I was like, oh, yeah, I can headline. I didn't know shit about comedy. And then the next time I come in, I eat shit. And I walk like a little puppy with a tail. I didn't come back for like a month and a half. But then as you do it for a while and you're on the road, you accept that there are going to be crappy sets. It's just you're not always going to be on. The only thing is, if you're having great sets 90% of the time, that's fine. If you're down like 70%, it's you. It's not the crowd. Like, it's one of those things. If you're having 70% of the time you're having good shows and 30% you aren't, I think it's probably you, not the crowd, because a good comic is going to get 80% and up.
You never blame the audience. That's what my first ex-wife, Alana, told me. Don't ever blame the audience. You're there for them. I mean, this is what you're saying is, if you're going to point fingers, look at you, because they're not there for you. You got to be there for them. This is a service you are providing, which is laughter. And if you're not funny, at least be interesting. That's performance art. Look at Andy Kaufman. There's a school there where you get away with not being that funny, just kind of fascinating. And I think that's a great school, just to be unpredictable. And they don't know what you're going to do next, which I think is a great tool for stand-up, because I don't think I'm that funny, but I kind of know a little bit about the element of surprise. And I learned it from Andy Kaufman, I think. Did you use that in your act? The element of like, they don't know what's coming next?
No, I do it more now. I was, my act, I would do a lot of just jokes. I love to write jokes. And the problem is, I've talked to like John Mendoza and Wendy Liebman about this. When you do that many jokes, it's just hard to remember. When you you see a Wendy or a John and they do, and even the late Geechee guy, these guys would do like 40 minutes of one-liners. You're like, how the hell do you remember like 125, 150 jokes? It's a discipline. But I think for now, I write and I take a little notebook up, but I go to how I feel. I take it off where if I'm sitting there, I'm on stage and all of a sudden I'm like, I don't want to do the same act. And I go, I thought about this, because I don't do it. I do it occasionally now. I do it for fun now, but it was different back then because you have the pressure on that you had to make money. Because if you did shitty, you'd lose a gig. Then, oh my God, I lost. They have 4 clubs. I'm a feature. That's 3 weeks. That's 12 weeks of work I got to make up. So I think that's what happened to me. But I want to get back to you about the comedy. You know, you got back on your horse now, and you opened for Cher. Now, what did William Morris? What did they help you get? What was some of the work they helped you with? Because William Morris, people you don't know, William Morris, especially back then, was one of the biggest. Them and UTA were like two biggest in the town, and of course, management.
Did you say UTA is like a like a bladder infection? Is that a UTA?
Yeah, no, that's no. You know, UTA, the agency.
UTA, yeah. Well, you know what? They were present. They got me the Cher thing, and I'm not gonna cast any aspersions on William Morris. I don't know if they're out there now watching this, so I'm not gonna say anything. But one of the things that happened, without mentioning any names, was I got to go to the Super Bowl when Michael Jackson was the halftime show. That's one thing I got. One of the things that did occur after these initial things, and I was headlining after a while, those were feature acts. And then I started to headline, thanks to Barry Katz, who got me started on the college circuit. And I was working with Jason Solomon as a manager, and he was a good manager. But William Morris, with all the people they managed, Gilbert Gottfried and Andrew Dice Clay, I think at the time, all the people that they were managing, when I went for a third audition for Saturday Night Live, I think they forgot to book my appointment. And I was pretty irate about that. But I did get a sitcom, and they negotiated. I was on the Carol Burnett show, the last incarnation of the Carol Burnett show in 1991, and they negotiated that. And we were working with really young agents who were just coming out of the mailroom. And I had a choice to let them handle me or to let more seasoned people handle me. Oh, I got to take this. It's Scam Likely. Scam, how you doing? Yeah, okay. The strong silent type. So anyway, so they negotiated my deal for Rhythm and Blues, which is a sitcom I did in 1992. But we couldn't get past that. In other words, it should have opened up all these doors. It was a very high testing pilot. I was really front and center doing all kinds of interviews, People Magazine. And I'm very thin skinned. I could barely take it. I was just about to become a new dad. And somehow I thought that my career should have been forwarded by the show. Unfortunately, the show got waylaid by the unfortunate LA riots. And since we were doing a largely African-American show and I was the only white guy, instead of dealing with the issues at hand, the social unrest and the things that All in the Family would have tackled and become huge, they walked away from the thing that would have made the show a hit, which was strong writing with a strong social. They went for formulaic, easy stuff and made me rather a moron, because I started out in the pilot as a very articulate, passionate man, who was
the show is you're a DJ who it's an all black station. They think you're black because you're Bobby Soul, right? Was that his name?
Based on your voice, they didn't know I was white. They hire me sight unseen, and I walk in and I'm obviously white.
So that's
and a great opportunity to see reverse racism and how society functions that way. But once the riots broke out, all bets were off. It was too sensitive. And I don't blame anybody, but it would have been nice to see what happened if they trussed up and tried. So it was watered down.
I want to ask you, I want to interject real quick. I want to go back a little bit. What was it like working with Carol Burnett? Because you show some clips in your Being Robin movie, but I mean, Carol Burnett is like, growing up, I mean, that was, you watched her and Tim Conway and Harvey Korman. I mean, I watched it with my family. I was the youngest, and we would all just laugh and laugh and laugh. Yeah. But what is it like when you're doing comedy and all of a sudden you're sharing the stage with, she was a legend back then. She's even more of a legend now. But what is that? What is that like as a young comic? You're in Hollywood and you're working with fucking Carol Burnett.
Well, I was 28 years old, and like I said, I'm thin-skinned. They had veterans on the show: Richard Kind, Chris Barnes, and then me. And there was a couple other people that didn't end up making it through the whole season. And Jessica Lundy and Megan, somebody. I'm sorry. Anyway, the chance to work with Carol one-on-one was there at the very beginning. And the very first sketch of the very first show of the very first season, of which was only one, was me and Carol. 8-year-old Jewish neurotic me playing her agent, trying to convince her to be a lookalike of herself in a bowling thing, like a sort of charity event. She's like, I'm not going to be my own body double. That's my own lookalike. That's crazy. So I'm trying to convince her to do it. But see, I'm from the sort of theatrical studio school of acting. So I need to prepare. What do we do? Who is my character? How do I behave? And I'm getting into all this stuff. When you're with Carol, bang, comedy, smack, now, action, choice. Which I do normally, but when you're faced with Carol Burnett, you want to sort of, I was a little freaked out in front of the studio, the network, the director, this cast, and I didn't come up with the behavior they wanted to see right away. So what happened is another castmate stepped in. I don't want to tell you who it was, but he went, I think I have a solution. And he took her aside and the director, and they said, Roger, why don't you step out? Disaster number 6. And that's kind of how it went. Now, I did have some scenes with her one-on-one. And the one that I had that didn't go so well either was the one where I show up late to take her daughter to the prom. And the lines are, and that's the one in the movie. She goes, what happened? I said, well, I was on my way over here to pick her up, and I got scared, and I went to the prom alone. And that's the line. But I tried to crack her up in rehearsal. And I said, I went to the prom alone. And then I went parking alone. And she just looked at me like, and I thought it would kill her because she's a little naughty in her sensibility. She likes a little good, sexy joke. She didn't like that one. So we didn't get to do it in the taping. So my wings were clipped by my own hand. But I did get to warm up the audience, which was a great job at the Carol Burnett show at her old, soundstage. I was the guy that would go up between the scenes and warm up the audience and do my shtick, my act. And I got to be in Clueless because of that, because Amy Heckerling was in the audience. And it was a great thing in itself. But I just couldn't stand toe to toe with her. The most wonderful moment I had was when we were all dressed up in tuxes and gowns and waiting for the scene to start. And I just took her hand and said nothing. And she took my hand and we waltzed for a minute without saying a word between, takes. And that was just the most marvelous, graceful moment that I had with her. It was lovely.
So the Carol Burnett, and then you go to your sitcom, and then you become the Zima guy. And you said Z instead of S. How did this Zima guy come about? And I know we talked about this years ago, and that was sort of what left you to like the breakdown somewhat. So tell me about the Zima guy, because people, you don't know, Zima was this drink in the 90s, and it actually came back out a few years ago, and I actually got a 6-pack, and I forgot how disgusting it was. It was so bad. And I was like, I said to myself, I told my wife, I go, they have Zima, and she's like, really? I go, I got to get some. So I open it up and I go, oh my God, this is awful. Because it's worse than a wine cooler. But Zima was the big roll up. So how did that role come up? Was that after the sitcom?
Yeah, what happened was there was a little bit of an overlap. I think after Rhythm and Blues was canceled, but before I was fired from Saved by the Bell, probably because of the Zima thing. I'm a beer spokesperson. They didn't want me on Saved by the Bell, so I was fired after 2 rehearsals. Nobody knows that I was actually
hired. Who are you supposed to be in?
I was supposed to be a professor of anthropology, Jeremiah Lasky. I had some fun shtick, and they laughed at the table read, but the next day they were like De Niro on the poster of Goodfellas. Nobody laughed, and they called me that night and said, Roger, I'm terribly sorry. But the Zima thing was 2 years. I think it was about 2 years, maybe a year and a half. And then the third year, my contract was supposed to be like $500,000. And we were like, oh my God, this is a house. This is like a lot of money. And we can do a lot. We just need to hear from the ad agency, and waiting to hear, and we calling them and they wouldn't respond. Meanwhile, I'm out on the road performing as a stand-up, and I'm on, I don't know if you're familiar with Brother Weeze in Rochester, but he's a famous DJ he's a Vietnam vet, and he's beloved, and there's thousands of people listening to his show every day. So I'm on with Brother Weeze talking about my show. Somebody calls in and says, hey, Zima guy, you know you're fired? And I'm like, I'm sorry? Yeah, they fired you. It says in the inside of the bottles, the clear bottle, it says, good news, we dumped the character with the hat, which was me. I'm like, oh my God. Okay, can somebody go get a 6-pack of Zima, please? And we talk and they come back and it says, sure enough, good news, we dumped the character with the hat. Now, I'm the character with the hat, all right? I'm finding out publicly that I'm fired. I'm fucking fired in front of thousands of people, not taken into some office, not even called, but publicly fucking humiliated. Not cool. So what do I got to do here? I start drinking Azimas, right? I'm pissed, but I'm going to get even more pissed because now I'm going to drink. And I've been sober for over 21 years now, Steve. So, but back then, I'll go through the whole 6-pack and I start saying shit like Zima tastes like carbonated piss. And, and Zima's, one zip and you want to commit suicide. And I'm saying all this stuff on the radio because I don't give a shit. I said worse things, but I'll leave it at that. And I got a letter from their legal department saying, you need to shut up. You're the spokesman. I get, I'm not the spokesman. But if I had been able to keep my mouth shut, I probably would have had that house. I could have had a nice, pretty little lawsuit for how humiliating that was, But I think that being 30 years ago, even though I sort of acted out how angry that could make a person, show business is full of those humiliations. I look at like Joker 2 or something that didn't go well. I don't know. There's another example, that new Tom Hanks movie. That's really embarrassing to the filmmakers. And you have to be able to take that kind of hit. And I couldn't back then. So I just dove into the Zimas and the cocaine and the heroin. At that point, everything, it was like watching a Zapruder film in slow motion with me.
So you sitting there and you're now after the Zima thing, what are you doing for a living? Are you still doing stand-up? I mean, what's going on? Are you just getting stoned all the time? Are you doing blow? Are you doing heroin? I mean, just was it out of control?
No, I was more gambling at that point. And one of the other disasters that happened was I was in somewhere in New England at a Catch a Rising Star and Princeton. And I had already had a breakdown on that stage a few years back, and they gave me the rest of the weekend off. I was exhausted. I started throwing things at the audience. I was on a lot of weed, and I was just flipping out. I was just I went too far. You know when you start getting the nut foam that you got to simmer down. So I'm on medication now. I'm bipolar, and that means, easy does it. But the stand-up thing that I did was that I gambled all night long at a nearby casino. And I was so tired, I wrote my act on a piece of paper. And then I read it off the paper. What am I going to do next? And then I super soaked the audience with this thing. And they didn't like that either. And they asked me to never come back. I was blackballed from the Catch Rising Stars forever. So that was when I really started to do drugs. I would try to come back. I got like a guest spot on Sybil, Tales from the Crypt, Pacific Blue. I play these different parts, but that was really it. And then I descended into a real problem with drugs and alcohol until 2003. I got sober, but I couldn't get sober immediately. There was like 8 months I could stay sober and fall off, and then 7 months and fall off. And finally in 2003, I got sober. But, that we're here, I would say to anybody watching this show, and especially there's a lot of drugs and alcohol in comedy. Am I right? I mean,
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember I remember playing the comic strip in Fort Lauderdale in like
yeah.
'89 or '90, and like the bouncer wanted to give you an 8 ball when you walked in. I mean, it was a
Those
second
were the
nature, and
days,
especially
my friend.
and I was working with Mitchell Walters, so that was like he was one of Kinnison's guys, and so it was just like I remember I was sitting there, I was blowing my nose in the bathroom, and Walters is like, "Hey, Cooper, you have Coke and you're not sharing it?" And I'm like, "No, I'm blowing my nose. I'm actually blowing my nose." But I know how it
Right.
was. So you were going back and forth. Now
Well, I
I
want
want to
to.
get to the point. Go ahead.
Let me just finish this little piece because it's the most important thing I can tell you in the whole show. What I learned is get out of Dodge. And can you hang on to that thought for a sec? You got it? Okay. What I learned was because my sponsor told me this, get out of show business because I kept trying to get back in. And he said, why don't you can't be in show business, it's killing you because you keep relapsing around it. So I took a long hiatus from show business. Guess what? It was still there when I came back. And that is the message to anybody who's struggling with mental illness, drug addiction, alcoholism, gambling. You can stop. Look at Robert Downey Jr. He stopped cold. And now I think he's like the highest paid actor on the planet because he took the time to build a foundation to work off of. And that's really the whole message of this is to just, you can come back. Don't keep trying to, hang in there because you're just building something on quicksand or wreckage, you know?
Well, that's what I was going to say. That's why I get you to the movie. I watched the movie, and
Yeah.
you had the Robin Williams impressions, but Bill Kirkenbauer's in it. He said he was asking you to come to Vegas, but you kept turning him down because you were living in on a lake painting, and that's where you ended up. That's when you started getting into painting. You moved to Massachusetts, and the business is behind you. Even though you've done all this stuff, you're like you wrote it out, you get rid of it, and so he asks you to come do a show, and you kept saying no. So in the movie, you had a dream with Robin Williams talk to you. Now, how much of that movie is 100% true, and how much is probably? Did you have a dream with Robin Williams, or is that just for artistic pleasure, or artistic whatever it's called, freedom, because you do a great Robin Williams?
That's a really good question, and thank you for asking. And I know I drone on and on. That's the coffee and the bipolar, but I'll try to be concise because I want to ask you some stuff too. I used to dream that I was him. So I wasn't just dreaming about Robin. I would dream that I was him. And that's a very odd feeling. Like, oh, I'm Robin Williams in this dream. How fun for me. And whatever was happening as Robin Williams. So this relationship with Robin goes way back, even before he died. I've always felt this weird connection with him ever since I saw him on Mork and Mindy. So how much of the film is true? The veracity of this film is largely true. The emotional basis of this film starts with Robin died. First of all, I got out of show business and I still live in New England. I still paint pictures. That's what I do. And I still do shows. I got back to my career. Robin dies. It took me a few days for it to sink in, and then I was tragically and just horribly upset. And like everybody else, like, how could that even be? How is that even possible? That fireball of energy, of brilliance is gone. I couldn't accept it. The night came, which is very true to the movie, when I looked in the mirror. People had been asking me, are you going to do a tribute? Because I am an impressionist and I'm known for doing him. But I said, no, I'm out of show business. I'm done. Never. And the night came when I was sort of mulling it, and I made a face in the mirror, and it got real. I saw him, and then it jumped to a moment where I was completely engulfed in him, and not just, I want to say, possessed, but I experienced his last moments, his death, and I understood through extreme empathy what it was like to be Robin Williams and lose that. And I did it in the first person. My friend was there, and she was holding me and I was just crying, and the voice coming out of my mouth wasn't my own. It was Robin, and my arms looked hairier, and I was just experiencing my own death as Robin. And I understood what it was like to die and lose the brilliance and the life force as you circle the drain. And it was one of the worst moments of my life. However, out of that came this presence, and it got to be like an imp, like, oh, come on, we're going to go back to work now. You have a good time now. Come on. And I'm like, no. And then there was one night where I felt him experiencing my girlfriend, like physically. And I'm like, dude, what is this? And he was really making himself present in my life. Now, I'm bipolar. I know that, but this was very real to me. And I'm also an empath. So I didn't know whether his presence he was conscious, or I'm just cooking this up because I've studied him. But it didn't matter. It was very real to me. And I didn't know what to do with it until the day I threw him out of the studio, because he grabbed my paintbrushes and he was just having fun. And I was trying to paint a painting for a customer. And I kicked him out. I said, there's no show. I'm not doing it. The hell out of here. I really opened the door and let him out, just like in the movie. And then I started thinking, what if it's Robin? Like, who am I to say no to Robin Williams? And I started thinking, maybe I'm being asked to do something that I'm not comfortable with, but just the same, it's of service to somebody that I dearly love who just departed. So I started thinking about it, and I let him back in. I said, okay, what do you want to do? And I called Kirkenbauer and I said, okay, go ahead and book something. The first thing he books was this 600-seat casino in California. First time I performed. And he was just like releasing the genie. He just exploded on stage. And I've got the video.
Now, okay. When you went on stage as Robin, because we all know Robin was into the improv. Now you're going on stage. It's the first time, and you haven't been on stage for a long time either. So it's not like you just walk up and it's like, oh, we're back, But
no.
So when you go up, did you prepare an act? Did you study Robin? Did you want to do some of his bits? What was the act you did that first night, or did you just go improv because you could do impressions and Robin did impressions?
No, it was carefully scripted for the most part. There was an intensive period of writing rehearsal. I had it planned out. I worked really hard. I even brought in somebody to watch, and he directed me to keep my eyes off the floor and look up and, and do all that. But when I got out there was this incredible sense of freedom and play. So there were things that happened in that show outside the perimeters of the script of what we had written that were really feeling like Robin was out there playing. And that's because I got out of the way, and it seemed like every time I did the show and I got in the way and tried to control it, he was stifled. So I had an activity before the show and preparing like an actor prepares. I'm a method comedian, where he would say, okay, you stay there now. You stay right there. I'm going to go do the show. Okay. And I would be free to go and do the show. And Robin was, I'm, free of me. So I couldn't get in there and block and edit and control. It was pretty much, I said the naughtiest joke. I did a show on Thursday last week, and I said the naughtiest joke that my sister had created, and I laughed my ass off. And she was sitting in the audience, and I said, my sister wrote this. And I did it because Robin said, oh, come on, you can do it. And I was like, oh, no, okay, here it is. And it has to do with Hermie from...
Do it. What was it? Do it. What was it?
It was Hermie the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. My sister and I, who's a very funny girl, she says, I said maybe Hermie was actually short for hermaphrodite. And she goes, why am I such a misfit just because I have a big clit? And I fucking fell out. My sister's really funny. So I promised her that I wouldn't do it in the show. And then when it came time, I unloaded it and just did it. And she and I thought it was wonderful. And the rest of the audience was like, because I do some naughty stuff. I even do Elmer Fudd having, sex, going, oh, be very, very quiet. I'm looking for the clitoris. and stuff like that. And people are like, oh, but it's Robin, it's good times. And in the end of the act, after all that naughtiness comes the heartfelt stuff, the sage part of Robin that comes out and is all about love and humanity. And so the show ends on a really kind of a lovely, mushy feeling.
Well, the show, okay, so you go from Kirkenbauer. So then how do you start building momentum? How do you get booked? Because I know you worked it a lot, and I would see your posts on Facebook. So you get done with Kirkenbauer. So did you get that? Did you get that that comic feel back? And when you were going to start performing, did you ever worry about your sobriety? Because you said, and you said it in the movie too, that you could not get back in business because of your sobriety. But now you've been 21 years sober. But when you started doing these more bookings, do you start getting bookings pretty quick? Does word start going out that this guy's the ultimate Robin impersonator, or what happens?
No, interestingly enough, it's a good question. We did the one show, and then basically nothing happened for most of the year. I started booking myself on local gigs, like a restaurant, a pizza house, the VFW. I would do these small cabaret size gigs, invite people, maybe have 50 people. And then he started booking gigs. And then there was another guy who was already on the circuit, who could book bigger gigs, casinos and theaters, performing art theaters, and so forth. So Kirkenbauer and this other guy booked a lot of cool stuff. And then last year I did a tour of Canada, one side to the other. We never got to a level of, I think I could have probably lost my footing if it got real big, Steve, which brings us to the movie, because the scariest thing wasn't going on the road and doing these shows, because I had that down. I could do the show. I could get on a plane, do the show, and come home. I could be in casinos and bars. It didn't bother me. There was enough. I'd go to meetings out of town and do whatever I had to do, stay sober and sane. And I worked through some horrific being sick, like being on stage with bronchitis, and I had these things removed from my vocal cords, this precancerous stuff recently that was removed, and I was developing a real rasp in my voice. But the second act of the show was always other impressions that I do, and they were really brutal, like doing, Burgess Meredith on The Voice, that's really rough. Al Pacino, really tough, and Red Fox, and doing all that, like really gravelly, stuff. And that was what was killing it. It was yelling and screaming. Not so much Robin. But I was pooped, and I had continuously had laryngitis and exhausted. And but we never got to big time, like in the early days, in the 80s, when you could get on Caroline's Comedy Hour on TV and The Tonight Show and stuff like that. I never got to that level again, which is fine.
But when you were touring on it, I mean, was there ever a fear though that you might lose your sobriety? I mean, you said you can get on a plane, but it's also, when you come out after a show and someone's saying great show and someone goes, hey, do you want to drink? You're used to saying no, but now you're, and you're somewhat living in the vein of Robin. And no, Robin got sober, but there were stories back in the day. Someone would go to Robin with like a gram of Coke and go, do you want a line? And they do the whole gram. There's those stories. So did you ever worry, because you are bipolar and you were channeling Robin, but as you said, did you ever worry that crazy part of Robin might take over, because people probably want to see the excess, because everyone wants to see excess. Like, if you're Keith Richards, people are always probably offering you shit, even though Keith Richards doesn't do drugs anymore. They probably ask him. So did you ever worry about that?
That's a really good question. And I think, for anybody that's our age, who's been through the 80s and survived, there was another part of Robin. I would do all the wild shit I wanted to on stage for Robin, for his sake. He'd go completely berserk, and I'd be totally drained at the end of the night. And Robin would stick around, and I remember having a few encounters with women, but that was the extent of it. And Robin was still very active for the next couple of days. It's hard to just wind down off of that, but it's a Robin that's more zen, more like Sean McGuire and Good Will Hunting, like, hey, Chief, you got to go back to the room now. We got to rest up for tomorrow. 2 shows. And so there was that more mature Robin that was really looking out for the good of the show. And that takes place of the, no, I'm totally fucked up now on skates. It just doesn't occur to you to even play that, because I really treasure my sobriety and I protect it with my life. I'll drop out of this stuff before anything happens.
No, as a comic, when you go up as Robin Williams, is it easier because people, they're coming to see, it's an evening with Robin Williams. They're coming to see that. So is it easier, like, because you have him down, you have all the reactions and all that stuff. Is it easier as a comic that you don't really have to worry because you can just sit there and go, nano, Shazbot, and the crowd will go fucking crazy? I mean, is that, as a comedian, is that, yeah, I mean, what is that like as a comedian? Because you would do material before, but now you have a safe out.
Well, I'm not all that comfortable doing it after all. I am terribly insecure about my Robin impression because my teeth are too fucking big. I can't make the shape with my face that I really like unless I do this and sort of really work it, And that's just an impression I'm doing right now. I'm not really there, but if I kept going for a while, Steve, we're out of here, So if I start to get into a groove, I feel Robin pulling in and taking over. There are nights when I don't feel him so much and I just have to do an impression. And there are some nights when I say, whoa, this isn't just a show, it's a seance. Because I really feel the more people are laughing, the more he gets wound up into it and the more playing occurs. I mean, there was one night, I remember, there was a lady with her foot up on the chair. Let me do the other one. There was one night, and this is where Robin comes out with his brilliance. I'm just a vehicle. I'm in Florida, and there's some drunk lady with her husband, and she says, hey, won't you come out and have a drink with me? And I said, oh, I don't drink anymore, but I better go eat you under the table. And there was this hush while her husband got up and blocked out the light. And it was one of the funniest accidents. And I just used it in every show as a story because it was just the kind of thing that even accidentally he would stumble into. And the other really naughty thing was a lady in a cast. And I'm pretty sure she was in the Lesbianese army, which is fine. I'm a lesbian too. And it was up in a cast. And I said, well, what happened to your leg? And she says, I broke it sliding into second. I said, oh, I broke my finger sliding into third. And people were like, no. But I mean, that's Robin. You know what I'm saying? He could not resist doing that if it popped into his head. And I'm not going to stop him. The audience will do with it what they will. And some people say this is kind of offensive. Do you know anything about Robin?
Yeah, that's the thing. They think that's like people always think that.
What's that?
So what made you decide to make the movie? Because you made this movie and did you sit there because you're touring, and once again, you don't want to get back involved in the business, but then here you are producing and making a movie. So what made you decide to do that? Because did you worry about your mental capacity? Because doing all that shit is a lot of fucking work.
Well, I've never done it, although I did another movie called Who the Hell is Bobby Roose, which was a companion piece, which is about an impressionist who goes mad also. But this was specifically Robin. It could be the sequel to that. The decision came when about 5 years into this touring, I was thinking what a play this would be. Because I have these conversations with Robin, like we rehearse in the woods. And I remember early on, I said, Robin, do you have any idea how exhausting this is, this show? And he goes, do you have any idea how difficult it is to come back to life in your schleppy body? And I laughed because that just popped into my head. And the other time was when I just said, Robin, you want to rehearse? He goes, yeah, I'll take it from here. And I'm like, what do you mean? Goodbye. And I just felt myself completely taken. Head, soul, mouth, face, pure Robin. And I don't know if it was disassociation or just the willingness to let go and let Robin do what he's going to do in the woods. So those moments were very interesting to me, including the fights that we had, the struggle that we had, the beginning of it, where I said, no, there's no show. We're not doing this. Oh, you don't respect me. Yeah, I do. Well, you don't love me. Oh my God. Are you Jewish? Stop with the guilt. We'd have this. And finally, I said, this would make a hell of a play. The only problem is I'd have to play both parts, and my face wouldn't be as effective to look and behave two different ways at different times, going back and forth is too much. So I said, what about making a movie out of this idea, out of this little play? And I thought, well, the first act would be all the struggle between me and Robin to create the show. And the second act would be the show itself. That was the play. But the movie evolved in a weird way because I didn't want to tell my story. I wanted it to be more fictionalized by a guy who's really delusional. And then I wrote a script and I had all these ideas, the scenes, and shot a trailer, and raised a bunch of money. But it didn't really work as a semi fairy tale. Somebody said, just do your story, tell the truth. So it became a documentary in a way. I'd reenact scenes that actually occurred. For the most part, it's a very true to life. Like there is a scene with a psychiatrist. I've been to a psychiatrist on medication with these issues. And so, there's one scene that is definitely not true to life, but we needed a scene to move the story forward. And I reenacted the scenes from my life that occurred. And there's a lot of clips from my actual show in the film, which makes it an interesting documentary, including interviews on the news where I'm sitting there as myself, like talking like this. And then the ones where I turned the corner and said, let me just dress up like Robin and I'll take the night off and just let Robin do it. And that's part of the story where I just disappeared,
So when you saw the final cut of the movie, were you happy about it? Did you like it? I mean, because, as you said, earlier in your career, you had a very thin skin. And now with social media, it's not a lot different back then.
Right.
I mean, they could have been like, oh, we hate that fucking Zebra guy. Just boom, 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 boom. It's different now. Yeah. So now, I mean, what were you worried about the input and the feedback you get about it because you do have a thin skin?
Well, the difference now, because this is you're really good at this, Steve. You nailed the important stuff. I appreciate it. You're not asking me about my suit. Why didn't I wear a suit? Stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
When first of all, I didn't create the film. I'm a vessel. I'm like the bricklayer. The ideas come from somewhere else. If you're spiritual, you know what I'm saying. It's all, you're a vessel. You're a channel for creativity. Same with the painting. I put the paint on the canvas. The creativity comes from wherever the hell creativity comes from. You channel it. You are a vessel. You're a God. You're a hand in it. So in making the film, I'm waiting for instructions instead of making decisions. So the film I made was based on the instructions I was getting, the ideas that were coming, and I had a blast editing. If you're tweaky and I'm wicked into composition, so it took me 2 years to edit. And originally I sort of took songs from the internet and just put them in there. I bootlegged everything. I wasn't going to make a big movie. This was just for let's have a fun time. So I made the film. It took me 2 years. There were rough cuts and there were, trials, and I opened it up in 2023 and nobody bought this because there was no marketing. And I put it away after a year. I sold 1,000 on the road, just signing the DVDs and, $10 or whatever. And I was done with it. Then the really difficult part came. And to answer your question, when you're doing everything, including editing, acting, directing, producing, fundraising, and marketing and distributing, you have this other part of you that has to stay objective. You can't get emotionally involved if somebody says they don't like it. However, this film was widely received as a really good thing. People were very moved by it. I wasn't expecting that. I didn't set out to go, I'm going to make a film that really moves the shit out of everybody. Here we go. You know, I just did it. And I didn't know how moving it was until I sat in an audience full of people that were affected by it. And that was like, oh, this film is touching people because they love Robin. And my story is difficult. It's not a big comedy, as you know. So the next thing that happened, and then I'll shut up, is I showed it to a man named Gary Rubin because Robin said to me, oh, don't give up now. We haven't got our Oscar, please. And I'm like, oh, God, it's done. I tried my hardest. We did it. We made a movie. People like it. It won a couple of awards and film festivals. I got to move on now. I really wanted to get away. I needed to for my sanity and my sobriety. He says, just try one more time, please. And I was like, I'm listening to this fucking person that's not even there. And I'm like, okay, this is in the woods. Just try one more. So I get in touch with this friend of mine who's a casting director who knows Gary Rubin. Gary looks at it and says, yeah, but can you use those images and those scenes with Robin in it? I said, that's not Robin, that's me. He goes, oh, okay, all right. So he took it on, we signed a contract. And he said, well, okay, how's your insurance? I said, insurance? I didn't know there was like, you gotta get a lawyer, you need insurance. He's connected to how to get it on Amazon. So I'm gonna listen, I'm gonna spend thousands of dollars and another whole year taking out the illicit music, paying out royalties and licenses, replacing music, editing it so it looks like a real film and not a toy film that somebody made in their bathtub, doing a sound, all the stuff that made me nuts. And it was never good enough. Amazon has to have it just so. And the aggregator was like, nope, you got to fix 70 things on this. And I was going mad because I wanted to get this over with. It was the idea that these lawyers were driving me to my freaking wit's end. And the aggregator was the aggravator. And I'm just like, can we get this, please? And then it comes time where they say, okay, November 5th, we're releasing your film. Oh, Amazon, 4 other, four other major, not Netflix, but like Google Play, Apple TV, some other small ones, Microsoft. This film is going to all these places. Amazon, man, big time. I get to play with the big boys now. November 5th rolls around. Here's Roger. Where's my film? I check Amazon. It ain't there, man. Where's my film? Well, Mr. Kabler, we've had some problems with your film. Like what? Well, it's a closed caption issue. I'm like, please fix it. I've spent 6 years for this moment. Please. And they figured it out. And 3 days later, it was up on Amazon. But what it took me through that year, from then till now, I still don't know how many people have seen it. Although I get a pretty good idea that we'll do good. Based on one of the smaller platforms that has paid out a lot of money. And so I still don't know how this is going, if I can retire, if I can fix my car. I'm still going to the food bank and in debt from this thing. And I'm feeling really a lot older. So kids, if you want to make a film, listen to me. Do it anyways. It's great. If you can survive it, it's really good experience when you watch your film in an audience full of people.
So you're happy with the final product.
I didn't say that.
But you are. I mean, you can admit
No,
it. I mean,
it's never good enough. It's not funny. There are a few laughs in it, but if you sit with the audience, they're not laughing. It's Robin Williams. Why isn't this a comedy?
Seize the Day. His movie wasn't a comedy.
No,
that movie Seize the.
No, so, it's okay.
Whatever, man.
No, but see, you're never going to be satisfied. But what you get is an acceptance that I did the best I could, and after a while, you let go. You give it to the world, and that is something I learned from living a lifestyle of being clean and sober and accepting that I have paintings to do now. The film will do what it's going to do. I haven't heard one person say this film sucks. Yeah, actually one. I thought Robin Williams was going to be in the film. It's like, it says it right there. It's not in the credits. He's dead. He can't be in a film. Sorry for your disappointment. Here's your $5. I mean, I can't.
So
You can't control what everybody thinks. I'm escalating.
right now, so now, are you doing the show? But you said you did the show the other night. Is there more plans to do your stand-up show? Do you plan to go and take on the road again, or what's up with that? I mean, because people like it, and you can make money. And
I'm tired. I here's the deal, Steve. I haven't worked since October. I had surgery to have cancerous goobers removed from precancerous removed from my vocal cords because I was and it needed time to heal. So I decided to do a test run show last Thursday at a big bakery near my house. I invite my friends to come and sit. Like 50 people came, and I was rusty and I don't have the legs and the energy, but I did the flag routine. You know the flag routine that he does when he dresses up like a flag? I'm the old glory. Yeah. And I added some new things like whether you're saluting me on July 4th or just using me for a bludgeon on January 6th, I'm there, and it's sort of updating it to protest a little bit. But I looked at the tape of that piece and I was like, dude is losing it. I'm Muhammad Ali in the twilight years. You got to get out now. I've got 5 more gigs. I'm going to tell Kirkenbauer, don't do anymore. If there's a couple that are pending, do them. But I'm not going to do a good show the way I did 10 years ago. I don't have the legs. I don't have the energy. I can't fill a room the way I did. And I'd like to, but you've got to tell the truth about where you're at. And Robin is a very high octane gig. So it's winding down. And for all you guys that are watching this out there, I'm sorry. I've got other things I got to do. Whoever's out there, is Kirkenbauer.
Well, you got to do this. You got to do this now. You got to do your Eric Roberts. Then I'm going to do my Eric Roberts. So
what's
you do your
Eric Roberts. The show now? I was watching the other day, man. His shit falls off at the end of the sentence. It's okay. Oh, it hurts so much. Bing.
I go, they should fucking die, Charlie. And I always go, him if he was in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. I'm a Charlie in a box. He's in the Misfit Toys. And then on stage, no one got it. I go, I'm a Charlie in a box. Everyone's like, what are you talking about? I said,
the land of the misfit actors. I squirt jelly instead of water, Charlie.
I have one final question. I always ask.
That's great.
It's because I like to hear the answers because everyone has a different answer. And looking back at your career, you've had ups and downs, and you said it. You've gone through, addiction, bipolar. You've been on TV, which a lot of people. You had a sitcom. I mean, it was a season, but that's much more than most people have. You had a national contract with Zima. You've had the story.
Yeah.
But looking back at your career, what are 1 or 2 things you're most proud about in your career and your life?
Wow, that's a good question. I'm not a proud person. I'm proud of the movie. By the way, it's called Being Robin, and you can get it on Amazon, or you can write to me and I'll send you a DVD. A little shameless promotion. I'm proud of the movie. I'm not proud of me, but the little movie that didn't have a shot. This movie is the most wonderful experience I've ever had. I mean, I've done some plays that were really cool, like Equus when I was 19. That stands out to me as a real accomplishment as somebody who's a committed actor. And I want to be an actor, purely an actor, not an impressionist. I don't need to be an impressionist anymore. So that really stands out. This film, Being Robin, stands out as the apex of whatever I've done because I did it on my own terms. I cast my friends in it. I put it together with 300 people who helped fund it. Besides that, just the ability to get up and play toe-to-toe with Carol Burnett was wonderful. It was a little painful. And to be able to survive, I think the most gratitude I have is the ability to survive a really catastrophic fall and come back and have work more than I've ever worked in my life, living in Massachusetts. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be. I watched the Oscars the other night And there's a degree of envy, like Adrian Brody might to do a part like that. But I'm also okay with what I did. The grandiosity is fading. I don't need to have. If I had an Oscar in this hand, my other hand would be, what about mine? I want my jacket too. It's never going to be enough. So you learn after a while, this is enough. How do you feel? Let me ask you the same question. We're two guys in our home. We're not in a TV studio. You got a million hats. Oh my God. And I got a million nicknames. These are all the things that I dig out of the ground. I dig for buried treasure. How do you feel about where you're at? Are you cool? Do you need more than this?
When I think about that, well, a few years ago, I was in the hospital for 8 days, and I'm lucky I didn't have a cardiac arrest. AFib screwed me up. And so after that, I changed it. When I was younger, I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be famous. Now it's like, you know what? I do this show. I do Cooper Talk. People, coopertalk.net. There's over 1,033 episodes. And I get to sit there and I'm happy. I get to talk to, when Cooper, I met you through Cooper Talk. And I mean, this week I'm going to talk to Paul Young, that 80s star. I talked to Gino Vanelli a few weeks ago. I talked to, I became friendly with a guy from Spandau Ballet. So I'm proud of it. I'm proud of Cooper Talk. And in South Jersey, I'm hosting a networking event tomorrow in Cocktails with Cooper. 70 people will show up. I have sponsors. I make money off it. So I got no complaints. I would like to get, on the speaking circuit or whatever, but I'm just happy just being now, and it's a matter of just, I have a great wife. We own a condo, our refrigerator and our cabinets are full. I mean, we still pay a mortgage. Our mortgage is very low, but we live a good life. And, we went to Italy for our anniversary. So, that's the thing. I always think if I had became big, when I was 30 or 35, I don't know if I'd still be alive, because the excess, you went through it, and
yes.
that's
And I can tell you, driving to the Tonight Show in the limo, I was not happy. I'm like, God damn it. I owed money. I was gambling. I'm stressed out. I'm in a limo on the way to the Tonight Show, and I don't want to be here. That is not success. None of that is successful. I was not happy. Exactly. I wanted to be home with my newborn baby. And I had a drug problem and a gambling problem and a girl problem. And I was just out of my wits and exhausted. It's not success. Fame is not all that. Okay? I don't need to be famous. I would love for this to be famous. If we could get there, I would love millions of people to see this film. It's nourishing. What's that?
I said Being Robin. Now, how can they get your movie? Where can they get it?
Oh, just go on Amazon. It's on there. It's on Google Play. It's on. I got the DVD here, and if you send me, I think $15, I'll send you an autographed copy, and someday it'll be worth $15. So exactly, that's it. And if you're in overseas, I'll send you the link. And you pay me for that. I want to share this because there's a humanitarian message in it at the end from Robin about love, about it has the power to annihilate hate in the end. That's what the movie becomes about. And that message is powerful. It's why it all happened, I think. And it's there's some sadness around the movie, but it's also, somebody said, the beginning of closure around Robin, which when I heard that, they got it. A lot of people find it healing. And so whether it's a big moneymaker or I get famous, just want to share it.
Well, that's awesome. And this has been great, man. I'm glad you came on tonight, Roger. Now you're on, do you have a website or is it just Facebook? How do people find out all your info?
There's beingrobinthemovie.com. And that's the website. And you can order the DVD from there. And then there's Facebook, which is also Being Robin the Movie. And that has, and there's reels of clips of the movie and, just Google Being Robin. Unfortunately, IMDb says it shows like 3.5 stars or something like that. But Rotten Tomatoes is at 97% 5-star. I mean, you can't go by the rating systems. Unfortunately, on Amazon, we only got 16 reviews because at some point they thought it was a bot doing the work and they shut it down. They didn't take it off of Amazon, but they shut down the ability to review the movie. But we got really good reviews from legit critics. Right now, Leonard Maltin and Whoopi Goldberg have the film. I don't know if they're going to watch it. It would be cool if they did.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, man,
But I'm
I
not.
want to thank you for coming on, Roger. It's always good to talk to you, man. And people, so check out Being Robin. I watched it, and it's really good, and he's great in it. And go to my website, coopertalk.net. Go to YouTube. The Coop Tank is my business podcast. I moderate 3 local business people. We talk about happiness, motivation, success, all that good stuff. Comedy Trainwreck. Thank you, Jimmy Corhan, for producing this show. Comedy Trainwreck's got a bunch of great shows up there. They have Cancel Culture with John Kensel. They have Coleman Green's show. They have a dating show. They have I think a new show with Chica Loca. They got a bunch of good shows. So check them out. And yeah, just don't forget, go subscribe to Coop's Comedy Corner on YouTube. And I'm Steve Cooper, and I will talk to you all next time. Have a good night.
Coops Comedy Corner.